y'all know I couldn't get through a summer, let alone 4th of July weekend, without talking some Jaws. So here I am. We're going to talk some Mayor Vaughn today, get into a little bit of a nuanced discussion whether he was right, whether he was wrong, whether it's somewhere in the middle. But I don't think it's as cut and dry as a lot of people make it out to be. Before I get into that, I'm going to give you guys my thoughts. We're going to pull up a Reddit post that I found on the very subject here. I'm going to get my thoughts out there, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Is Mayor Vaughn kind of the human villain of the movie Jaws? If you guys don't know, Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. I think it's the greatest movie ever made. I am not really on an island with that. There's a lot of people that love it. Last year it celebrated its 50th anniversary, and now at 51 years, god damn, does this movie still hold up. I'm excited. I'm going to watch it tonight per my usual 4th of July time frame tradition. But before I watch it tonight, I want to talk Mayor Vaughn. I don't need to go rewatch it. Like I said, it's my favorite movie of all time. I'm going to pull up a Reddit post here. We're going to talk about Vaughn's decisions and things like that. But way around, let's back up a little bit, okay? Right now, as of when I'm filming this video, way around the year 2020, which is a year that most of us would like to forget, Vaughn kept coming up in conversations, and it was very meme-worthy and GIF-worthy and stuff, and everyone was comparing Vaughn's decisions to the decisions of politicians during COVID. And it's a fun comparison, right? It's a fun comparison, you know, COVID being the kind of invisible, tiny little version of a great white shark in the waters, and politicians having to make decisions for the economy and, you know, trying to protect human lives, you know, the same type of decisions that Vaughn had to make with essentially similar information and, should I say, misinformation. I'm not going to get into my thoughts on the whole COVID pandemic because I feel very strongly about those things, and it doesn't really fucking matter. At this point, we're 6 years past it. But I do get the similarities. And it just kind of became a topic, right? Like, you know, any politician that opened up states and cities and businesses was compared to Mayor Vaughn. You know, you're killing all these people, blah, 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 right? But once again, it's more nuanced than that. So let's talk about Vaughn in general, guys. I don't want to go on a whole fucking COVID rant here. But let's talk Mayor Vaughn in general. Was he right? Was he wrong? So, end of the day, he had a decision to make, right? Or he had multiple chances to make some decisions, right? Brody was telling him that there was a great white shark in the water, killing swimmers, divers, you know, whatever, right? Killing people. Vaughn had that decision to make, but he also had what's in the best interest of Amity to make, right? So those two, that juxtaposition of, you know, what to do, and that's why he made the big bucks. That's why you're an elected official, right? It's not as nuanced of, oh shit, we better close the beaches at all. I mean, yes, that is, you know, black and white decision. Do we open and keep the beaches open, or do we close them down to hunt this shark? It's stated many times throughout this film that 4th of July weekend brings in the dollars, right? And, you know, Amity being a small summer town, and like Cape Cod or wherever the fuck it is, Martha's Vineyard, right? Being a summer town, that's what brings in so many dollars for the rest of the year. That's how people feed their fucking families, okay? So let's say right away Vaughn decides to close the beaches, right? Yes, someone like Alex Kittner would have still been alive, right? Most likely, as well as some others. But what happens to Amity? What happens to all these people's livelihoods, right? Is Vaughn reelected? Probably not, right? So that takes that away. Now I get it. Like, human lives are more important than somebody getting reelected for mayor. But think about all these families lined up in rows, all those people at the beaches, you know, whether it's Brody being a cop, whether it's people, you know, the other cop, right? You know, the mayor's office, you know, all these other little small town shops that get most of their business in the summer. And a big part of that comes from 4th of July weekend. All those businesses shut down and Amity becomes a ghost town. So I don't think he was right, but I also don't think he was wrong. I think, as with everything in life, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Let's see what other people are saying. We are going to pull up a Reddit post. Here it says, Mayor Larry Vaugh wasn't wrong. And as we get through this, remember, tell me in the comments, was Vaughn right? Was he wrong? Or do you agree with me that it's more nuanced than that, right? So let's get into it here. This says, I never quite bought into the notion that Vaughn was the villain in Jaws. So this person agrees with me. Granted, he's not the hero. Well, yeah. But he made the right call in a no-win situation. That's exactly what I'm talking about. What was he supposed to do? Completely upend the town economy on the off chance Brody was right about the shark, right? And that's another thing. Brody was new to being the sheriff, right? It was not really a secret that Brody was scared of water. He was new. He was an outsider. At the beginning of this movie, they really hammer home that Brody's kind of an outsider here. His first instinct is to close the beaches. Nobody else in this town would have ever had that instinct because they know what the beaches mean, right? So the mayor's supposed to just believe Brody. When Kittner happens, fine, different story. But it's crazy. It was really easy to judge from our couches, but I've been to places that almost entirely rely on tourist dollars. It's no joke. Yep. Without outside people coming in, these places would be in financial ruin. I certainly wouldn't want to be in the position of deciding whether people in your town can afford to feed their families or not. The off chance there might be a shark. That's exactly right. It was not an easy call. It seems like an easy call, right? Oh, big shark, close the beaches. No, it's not an easy call. Let's get into some of the comments on this post now. Okay, and see if people are agreeing with this person. Next person says, first comment says, my issue with him is he wasn't smart enough or maybe brave enough to tell the truth and still keep the beaches open. Well, we'll see. I'll read what else this person says, but I don't know if you can keep the beaches open and tell the truth in that situation. I'm not saying lie, right? I'm not saying what he did was right, but like that person in the first post said, it is a no-win situation, right? He certainly wouldn't be the first politician that's lied or stretched the truth, that's for sure. But if you say there's a shark there, nobody's going to go in the water. Remember, at one point in the movie, nobody is in the water, and Vaughn has to go convince that old couple to go in the water. Nobody's swimming. Nobody's having fun. And that was just with the threat of a shark. If he admits it, fuck no, nobody's going in the water. Okay, let's continue. That's why the audience sees him as the villain. They don't want people in charge to lie to them or tell them they can't do something. Well, that's for God. That's the truth. I don't want anyone in charge to lie to me, and I certainly don't want them to fucking tell me what to do. They want to be told the truth, then allowed to decide for themselves. Okay, fair point. I know it's a fictional drama, but in real life, the mayor should certainly not meddle with autopsy results and should be transparent while making his case to the tourists that he believes it was a one-off event and they'll be safe. However, they swim at their own risk. Okay, I agree with all that. 100% agree with all that. I'm not saying Vaughn was right or anything like that, but I agree with that post. Let the people decide for themselves. Okay? Agreed. Next person says, I don't know if I would say he was totally right, but I do hear criticism sometimes saying that Vaughn is cartoonishly one note and is the weakest part of the film, and I think that's kind of ridiculous. So do I. The man has motivations, and they're valid motivations for someone who is who a population looks to for leadership and protection. He always seemed like a real-life politician to me. Agree 1,000% with that. Absolutely, 100%, unequivocally agree with that statement. Okay, next. He was wrong because he didn't listen to people smarter than him. Well, true, but I wouldn't say smarter than him, but a more knowledge of the situation than him. Their expertise was in this situation, specifically talking about Matt Hooper, obviously. But he still has a job to do that is complicated, right? Next says, the economy does not turn wrong decisions into correct ones. It reinforces bad decisions that make matters worse. He gambled on his own knowledge, and it cost the town more than just listening to the experts. Yeah, I kind of sort of agree with that. But once again, what if Brody was wrong? There was no evidence at this point. None. There's speculation. And I don't recall any evidence until Kittner gets eaten. That's when things change, right? Kittner gets eaten, and then you got the other that kills the guy in the pond, right? And that's when at the hospital, Mayor's like, my kids were in there in the water too, Martin. He is certainly not a one-note cartoonish villain. Agreed. Or I don't agree with that. Let's scroll down. Okay. Here we're getting into the book, right? Now, this person's talking about the book. I'm not going to read this post, but yeah, in the book, there's mob connections and all kinds of other things like that. Next person, completely agree. He was put into a lose-lose situation. Most of the island didn't want to close. Sure, he was wrong in the end, but a vast majority of people wouldn't believe a killer shark was targeting humans. Yep, agreed. And I think we're going to keep hammering home that point here, right? There's no reason to keep going, but that's kind of my point too, right? It's a no-win. He was in a zero-win situation here. Did he make the right call based on how the rest of the film, the events of the rest of the film? No, he did not. No, he did not. But he wasn't wrong. He's not the villain. Hell, in Jaws 2, and I know we're just looking at the original Jaws, he was reelected, right? And I really wish they wouldn't have got rid of the deleted scene in Jaws 2 where he's the only member of the board that votes not to fire Brody. I think that would have been great for his character arc. But either way, moral of the story in my point of view, Mayor Vaughn was not wrong in how he handled he wasn't completely wrong in how he handled the situation. He is definitely not the villain of the film. So tell me your thoughts on Mayor Vaughn and his decisions in the original Jaws. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope everyone has a happy and exciting 4th of July weekend as we celebrate America's 250th anniversary. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.